The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game has a lot of really cool, different, and all very beautiful rarities. You know, the different types and amounts of foiling that goes on cards. But today, we're going to be ranking all of them from best to worst. So a couple of quick stipulations. I'm only going to be looking at rarities that have gotten at least one printing within the past year. That includes the following: commons, rares, gold letter rares, super rares, ultra rares, colorful ultra rares, secret rares, prismatic secret rares, ultimate rares, collector's rares, gold rares, starlight rares, and ghost rares. And we got our handy dandy tier list maker from ranked S to D. So before we get started, make sure you guys drop a like on the video and leave a comment with what your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Card rarity is. And be sure to subscribe, of course, if you aren't already. All right, let's get in. So of course, we have to start with commons. This is, of course, the most common rarity in Yu-Gi-Oh! These are the cards that have absolutely no foiling on them whatsoever. And you might think that makes them look the worst, but I actually really do like commons. All the artwork on common cards is pretty much printed as it was intended. Once you start adding different glittery, foily effects to things, some things can end up just being blown out by all of the foil effects or just look a bit too dark. But in commons, you can see everything perfectly. Another really cool perk to common cards is that, unlike most foils, they do not warp or bend when they're exposed to things like heat or humidity. While you might associate them with being on a budget, I actually think that there's a subtle brilliance to using an all common deck if you can get it. It just stands in this really cool, stark contrast to people who have completely maxed out rarity decks. So all in all, I think common's kind of just a cool middle of the road thing. It's actually got a couple things to like, but it definitely is very plain. So we're gonna stick it in B tier. All right, so next we're gonna move on to rares. They're basically the same as commons, except that the title of the card is in silver lettering. I used to not like this rarity a whole lot, I just never really saw the point, but I actually really like it a lot more as time has gone on. Like the fact that these cards also don't warp, and the fact that the picture is a lot clearer. But the thing that I like the most is when you can get an archetype where all the cards are printed in that rarity. Some really cool examples are things like Tenyi. So we're also gonna put rares in B tier, a little bit above commons, because I do think that that extra silver lettering gives them just a tad bit more flair. Next is gold letter rares. Now these were actually introduced last year in Maximum Gold. They're basically rares, but they have the gold lettering instead of silver lettering, which makes them look a lot more like ultra rares, which we'll be getting to in a bit. I'm not gonna lie, this one also takes a bit of getting used to. They look really cool because you kind of mistake them as ultra rares at first, and so you get excited because you'll see like a card that feels like it's a very normal run-of-the-mill card, but like it's in what appears to initially be ultra rarity. And I do think that that gold coloring works well for a lot of things. That said though, it actually leads me to feel a bit disappointed when I see the gold title, but then my eyes look down and the card is still common. Overall, they're still really interesting. I do appreciate their addition to the game. I think it was a really cool way to match the gold theming, and unlike the other gold rarity that we'll be talking about, I actually don't mind this one. So we're also gonna put it in B tier. So next we're gonna get into super rares. Now this is one that I used to really like a lot, but my opinions changed a little bit. With super rares, the artwork of the card has the foil effects. It's a pretty plain foiling, so it's nothing super glittery like a secret rare, but I do think that this usually makes cards look a lot more special than if they were common. However, in the last few years, I've found that many of the cards have just been printed with a very dark coloration. I feel like either it's the super effect or some other type of the ink that they're using, but with a lot of super rares these days, I just feel like I can't actually see or appreciate the card art. It just looks too dark to see. A cool touch I will say is that the attribute where monsters are concerned, or just the spell or trap icon, does also get the foil rarity, so that sort of looks nice. It makes them stand out in the light a little bit. But I think that that dark coloration thing just really kind of takes me out of it. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to put super rares in C tier. All right, next is ultra rare. So this is kind of just an age-old Yu-Gi-Oh! Rarity. This is where your title is in gold and your picture is also just got the hollow foil effects. In recent years, they've changed this, like many other standard rarities, to have the attribute or spell or trap icon also have the foiling effect, and even the stars on monsters. This is really cool. I think more foiling is generally a good thing. It actually can make some ultra rares look a lot like ultimate rares. You can see this in one of my favorite ultra rare cards, Cyber Dragon Hertz, which I legitimately always mistake as an ulti. But overall, ultra rare is just always a really nice one. I like pulling them from a set. I think that it has just a nice regality that has withstood the test of time really well. So I'm gonna put ultra rares in B tier, but at the very top. Okay, so the next one is the colorful ultra rares. They're basically the same as ultra rares, but they changed the title to, instead of being gold, it's just a different color, like red or blue or green. On the surface, this seems pretty cool. It's sort of like a custom version of a card. And I think that in a few select instances, it works really well. For instance, getting a red lettered copy of a Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon looks really awesome to me. Or getting a blue or green lettered copy of a card that's like water or wind attribute matches really well and looks cool. That said though, I just have not personally liked this rarity a whole lot. I think that more often than not, they just come across as a bit gaudy to me. They're just sort of colors for color's sake. I think that the standard ultra rare with the gold lettering tends to look a lot better and more consistent to me overall. So we're gonna put it in C tier, underneath super rare. So now we get into secret rares. These have always looked really cool. Instead of regular foiling, you get a glittery sort of parallel dot effect on the cards. And I have to say, this just works. Pulling a secret rare always manages to feel really special. Konami typically does a pretty good job of picking which cards deserve that secret rare foiling. Now that more of that secret rare foiling is applied on things like the stars and the attributes, I really do find that secret rares just work. I also like that that effect is even applied on the title of the card, so it just makes the whole thing kind of feel like it's alive and shimmering. The only downside to secret rares is probably just the fact that the glittery coloring can sort of obscure the art. So unlike super rares where I feel that the cards can just appear too dark, with secret rares, sometimes putting these secret effects on the wrong parts of the cards can make it where you just have no clue what's actually happening in the picture. Still though, secret rares always manage to feel really special to pull, so we're gonna put it in A tier. So next is prismatic secret rares. Now these are pretty similar to secret rares. They're used in the reprint 10s each year. They have a pretty similar effect and quality to secret rares, but they use very distinctly horizontal and vertical lines for the glittering and foiling effects as opposed to the diagonal sort of dot matrix that secret rares get. I don't mind this, but I just always find that these cards look a little bit gaudier. I don't know if it's because it feels like they kind of overdo it with the secret effect and tend to just seemingly put it across the whole card, or if it's just because it's really mainly used for reprint in like one set, so I haven't had enough time to grow attached to it. They're certainly not bad, but just to me, they don't hold a candle to the original secret rare in my eyes, so we're gonna have to put them in C tier. Next up is Ultimate Rares. Now, I'm gonna have to go ahead and say Ultimate Rare is my favorite rarity in Yu-Gi-Oh!, so spoiler, you probably know where it's going. Ultimate Rares are like Ultra Rares, but they actually use the foiling effect much more heavily because they emboss the cards. And to me, this makes all the difference. So in addition to the name and the levels and attributes and all that being foil, and of course, you know, the card image, they actually foil the entire border of the card. This to me makes Ultimate Rares feel extremely special. They've got a very regal air to them. They feel nice to the touch because you can really feel that embossing on them, and it just makes the entire thing feel like it shines. So we don't get that many new Ultimate Rare cards, but it does mean that anytime that we do, it's a really special event. My favorite Ultimate Rare card right now are the Ultimate Rare copies of Cyber Dragon in its dark version of the artwork. And there are just so many old Ultimate Rare cards that have been skyrocketing in value right now. So if it wasn't already obvious enough, Ultimate Rare is definitely going in the S tier for me. All right, next is Collector's Rare. They sort of combine the qualities of a prismatic secret rare with an ultimate rare, and then they still manage to give it like its own sort of flair. It's weird to describe it this way, but it almost feels like a sort of set of fingerprints have been on the card where the rarity goes, but like they're embossed, so it's not like smudgy looking. It looks really cool on the borders because it gives them this very textured look and feel. A small downside to this, and I actually forgot to mention this with Ultimate Rares, is that sometimes these can manage to make the artwork look a little bit dark or obscured, but I think it's not nearly as bad as the case with Super Rares. Collector's Rares also seem to kind of brighten up the borders as opposed to darkening them like Ultimate Rares do. I suppose that's kind of an aesthetic thing, whether or not you prefer that. Whenever I ask other Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, it actually feels like the sentiment around Collector's Rares is that they are cooler looking and feel more special than Starlight Rares, despite not being as difficult to pull. I suppose these are a little bit more divisive though. I don't feel like they have the appeal of tradition that Ultimate Rares do, so I'd like to know what you guys think about Collector's Rares yourself. As for me, I'm gonna actually put these in A tier. All right, next is Gold Rare. If you guys couldn't already tell, this is probably my least favorite rarity, especially of the ones introduced recently. Gold rares are different. In their most recent incarnations, they use a gold bordering around the card, but unlike collectors or ultimate rares, this just doesn't work. The gold bordering is like actually a weird sort of plasticky material that's like stamped onto the card. It's like layered on top of it. It doesn't work for me at all. It doesn't really have a nice texture to it. And also the gold effect is kind of applied on top of the card artwork as well. For some cards this works. I think that there's some really great examples of gold rares looking nice enough. In fact, I'll say that gold rares look better in pictures and kind of on video, but in real life I find them just sticky and weird to hold. They don't shuffle nearly as well. The gold looks less like a textured kind of fine gold and more like just a plasticky, shiny thing that just doesn't work for me. These also have been known to have some really bad quality control issues. Like there are actually Facebook groups and pages dedicated to just finding the most obnoxious misprints of this rarity. Now I guess you could say that does give it its own sort of charm because it's just so much of a mess. But yeah, these cards, sometimes they get damaged or like stuck to each other. I've even heard of the gold part just straight up peeling off. All in all, just not my thing. It's gotta go in D tier. Next up, Starlight Rare. I have mixed feelings on Starlight Rares. I definitely feel like they are special when you pull them because they're very difficult to get out of a pack. I believe it's like 1 in 600 packs. These sort of use a similar effect to the Prismatic cards where you get more of a vertical and horizontal dotting to the foil effects. It also seems to extend pretty much across the entire card, like border, card art, name, and all that stuff, but also just on everything in between. I think it's a rarity that works better for some cards than for others. Like for me, I can't always immediately tell the difference between spell cards, for instance, when they're Starlight Rare. They kind of just look like a weird secret prismatic thing. That said though, it works really well for certain monsters. Link monsters, and honestly most extra deck monsters just really great in this rarity. And I noticed that they too tend to give it to a lot of the waifu cards, things like Dogmatica, Ecclesia, a lot of the Evil Twins cards, the Charmers. They're also so expensive that it sometimes feels a little bit weird when you actually see somebody using it in their deck, because it's like, no, just like cage this up and don't use it ever. All in all, I'm gonna have to say Starlight is not my favorite rarity, but it does look and feel like a big moment when you get it. So it's gonna go in B tier. And the final rarity on this list is Ghost Rares. So basically they share a lot of similarities sort of with secret rares, but the card artwork is completely whited out. Well, I say completely. You can still see the outline of the monster and you can sort of see some of the shading on it, but because of that very faded white look, it looks like a ghost. I actually feel like this really fit with the whole theme of being difficult to pull. It's almost like an illusion. Is it really there? Can you really pull a ghost rare? I remember anytime I saw somebody pull one of these at the local card shop, it always felt like a huge moment, lots of screaming, lots of happiness. Ghost rare collections are a really cool thing. Because there's only one per set, the idea of getting every ghost rare from every set was really nice. We're putting ghost rares in the A tier. And that concludes my ranking of all the current rarities in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. So let me know what you guys think. What did you think of my tier list? Where would you place these cards for yourself personally? Remember, of course, this is all just my opinion, so I'd love to hear what you guys think down in the comments. And that's gonna be it, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.